when I read the Dr. Goebbels biography, what fascinated me was that when we first meet him, he's pro-Jewish. In his 20s, as a young student, he writes a very angry letter to his first girlfriend because she's made an anti-Jewish remark in a letter to him. And he writes back reprimanding her for this throwaway line and saying what a cheap shot that was. So that was the original Dr. Goebbels. But then he goes to Berlin, which is one of the strong points of the Jewish community in Germany in the 1920s and the 1930s, and he changes overnight. And this is one reason why the Anti-Defamation League decided this book must not appear. The book must not appear because, as they said, it creates the impression that they had it coming to them. And when I read that in the Washington Post, that they were saying that it had created the impression that they had it coming to them, I was very upset and very annoyed and very angry. Then I realized that, well, possibly for once Abraham Foxman wasn't all that wrong. I've never said they had it coming to them. But anybody who reads the book and sees the way that the opinions were formed and developed by the people who came in contact with the Jews may have reasonably reached the conclusion that yes, if that is true, then perhaps they had it coming to them. And this isn't just me saying this. Here speaks the voice also of President Roosevelt. President Roosevelt speaking to a French general, General Nogues, N-O-G-U-E-S, during the Casablanca meeting in February 1943. Roosevelt says, "I cannot fault the Nazis for what they are doing to the Jews." Of course, he didn't know all the details of what they were doing. But he says, "I can't fault the Nazis for what they are doing to the Jews, because if any alien people comes into another country and within a short space of time takes over all the lucrative professions, they swamp them, they hog them for themselves to the exclusion of the others, then of course they're going to get hated, and they cannot be surprised then what happens to them." And that is President Roosevelt saying that to the French General Nogues, and is recorded in the official memorandum on their conversation. So it's not just the extremist, neo-Nazi, fascist, incorrigible, much disliked David Irving saying that. It's the much liked President Roosevelt who had the same opinion. In fact, President Roosevelt, even talking with Henry Morgenthau, said the same thing. President Roosevelt talking with Henry Morgenthau, the Secretary of the Treasury, who kept a very good diary, which is here in Hyde Park, in the library, recorded by Henry Morgenthau. Roosevelt said, "If we take any large number of Jews into this country, the United States, then we cannot allow more than one Jewish family per town or village. That is all we can reasonably expect any community to stand." I can see looks of disbelief on your face, because you've always been taught that Roosevelt is the pro-Jewish president surrounded by Frankfurters and Rosenmanns and so on. But in private, he was very different. He said the same to Morgenthau a little later on in 1944. He said, "I'm deeply alarmed to see how the intake into Harvard is gradually becoming more and more Jewish." He said, "It is already up to 15%. This is quite intolerable. And I want you and the Jewish community to take steps in their own interest to try and see that the figure doesn't rise above 3%. This is recorded in the Morgenthau papers. You won't see them published anywhere. But I find it very significant